Hey, Bernie, thanks so much. Thank you so much, Rob, Dhani, and Kevin. That was insightful, fascinating, and inspirational. And a lot of what you talked about, there's a couple of common threads. I heard technology and I heard data. So we're going to talk today about the latest of what we're seeing in the data. And for those who aren't familiar with ADARA, you might wonder where the data I'm presenting today comes from. We have over 270 consumer brands that share their data with us, including some here you see on the screen and you likely recognize: United, Marriott, Singapore Airlines, and Travelport. So as a result of these partnerships, we have a lot of data. If you look at our map here, typically we see over 14 billion searches a year, almost 1 billion air and hotel bookings. On the next slide to see it on the global map. About half of that's in North America, half of it's around the world, EMEA and APAC. And we're able to get fairly granular on transaction behavior, as most of our 1 billion profiles have on average 30 data points per profile. We've made a lot of our data, the trend data you'll be seeing today, it's available on our website. It's organized by region, US, EMEA, and APAC. You'll see the URL here so you can access the data yourself. We do update it daily, so check back often for the latest. The insights you're seeing today have been developed by ADARA's brilliant analytics team. Of course, you're welcome to reach out to them if you're interested in custom reports and insights. We've made it easy. There's a purple request button there on the right. Let's turn now, what's new in the data? We've been seeing a steady rise in demand for leisure air bookings over the course of May, and in particular, we saw a big surge in last-minute air bookings during the week preceding the Memorial Day holiday. You can see the trend in the line chart on the left, which captures the air bookings for leisure travel by solo travelers and couples. We saw a similar trend for families. Charts on our website if you'd like to review it on our own, and reflects the booking volume index of January 2nd, broken down by the advanced booking window. As you can see in the magnified view, the amber line has been dominant since the beginning of May. Those are bookings, we capture it day by day. Those are the bookings that are being made for 91 plus days out, 3 months out. You see it being overtaken by the pink line for bookings that are travel within the next 2 weeks. When those bookings were made, that was exactly timed for the Memorial Day weekend. As noted, the index tops out at about 50, 50.76. It was 127 at the beginning of the year. So for those bookings, it was roughly 40% of the pre-COVID booking rate. In the table on the right, we've highlighted the destinations that were most popular for this last-minute surge. You see Miami, Dallas, and Chicago top the list. That's it for air bookings. Let's take a look at hotel bookings. And we saw a similar surge in hotel bookings for the Memorial Day weekend holiday. On the left, you see bookings for stays in the next 2 weeks. The pink line, with magnified to the pop-out circle, has really bounced up. It hit an index of 186.56. At the beginning of the year, it was indexed at 380, so it's close to 50% of pre-COVID volume. So that's some of the indexes have been as low as 10, 20% of pre-COVID volume, so that's a nice bump. The hotel destinations are fairly different from what we saw for the air destinations. The top three are Phoenix, LA, and Tampa. You might be wondering, well, wait, shouldn't there be a similarity between the fly destinations and the hotel destinations? And this is likely explained, we've been hearing a lot about nearcations or drive vacations, so it's likely explained by people choosing to drive to these spots rather than fly. Now, it gets a chance for some audience participation. Let's test your own assumptions about what's going on in the market. I'll pull together some of the questions we're getting asked by our clients, and we'll get a chance to put your answers in the chat box, and we'll do 3 of these for you. Here's the first one. For the US market, focusing on the US market, business travel will rebound before leisure. True or false? Go ahead and write down your answer. For business, for the US market, the statement is business travel will rebound before leisure. True or false? I'm saying false. Thanks, Ellen. Who else? A couple of falses. I'll give it another second. Go ahead and type it in. Okay, we're going to go with the predominant false. Let's take a look at what the answer was, what we found in our data. You're absolutely right. For false, as you can see on the left, what we did is we took the data and we checked the business leisure mix. Leisure is pink, business is blue, and we broke it into 3 time segments. Pre-COVID, January 2nd to March 13th, when we saw a real change in bookings. March 14th to 30 April, when we're really in the midst of the COVID change to travel, the COVID pandemic. And then the after May period, when we've begun to see a bit of rebound. And so you see that there's a bit more pink, about 5% more pink in the column on the left pre-COVID than after May 1 here in this rebound period. And so for those who said false, you're absolutely correct. Leisure ticked up 5% for domestic. We saw the opposite situation for international bookings leaving the US. Again, you see the mix, it's about 85-15 for leisure to business for international in the left-hand column for pre-COVID. On the right-hand column after May, again, it ticked up about 5%. It's about 20-80 in terms of business mix for leisure. And so for international, we did see business tick up about 5%. So those who said false, you were correct for domestic. If you were thinking true, you were actually correct for international. Let's try another one. And I should point out, ADARA, we think it's important in understanding consumer discretionary activity to look beyond travel. Bernie was making that point. Dhani mentioned it as well, that pulling in data, looking at a lot of different perspectives is really important. To meet this need, ADARA is bringing in into its data consortium additional data on dining and events and other signals of discretionary activity. Go ahead and put into your chat box your answer to the question here. Are people avoiding crowds, such as dining out? People are avoiding crowds, such as dining out. Is that true or false? Go ahead and put it in the chat box. I'm getting a false. True. We got a mix. True. Great. We've got a bit of a mix here, and let's go ahead and take a look at the results. This is based on people booking dining reservations. And I think that's a great sign of how willing people are to be next to other people. And we took a look at dining for 5 cities: Chicago, Dallas, Las Vegas, New York, and Tampa. You can see the 3 are on the rise: Tampa, Dallas, and Las Vegas, while Chicago and New York, where there are restrictions in place, are flat. You'll see, tiny little minuscule rise for Chicago and New York. They're allowing patio dining, so there's a bit of a change for those 2 markets. But for the most part, they're restricted from dining within restaurants. But you can see that where there aren't restrictions, Tampa, Dallas, and Las Vegas, we're seeing a rise. And so we'll go with the majority opinion here is that it's false. People are willing to be out and amongst other people once restrictions are lifted. If we look at the time frame when these reservations are for the 3 cities on the rise, the majority of bookings are for the same week they're made, the proportion of the pie that's in pink. For Chicago and New York, they're primarily 2 weeks out. That's a purple portion. And the majority of the bookings are for more than 3 weeks out. Again, that's reflecting the restrictions that's going to be later in June before those cities actually allow full-scale restaurant dining. Let's take a look at events as well. The panel before this was speaking a lot about sporting events, and we're watching that as well, looking at event data for a wide range of events, and it's a more modest gain than what we're seeing for dining. There's a single peak in demand from earlier in the month as some events got scheduled, such as NFL events, and it's floating at a fairly narrow range between 20 and 30% of the pre-COVID rate. If we look at the type of events, concerts are the most popular, followed by sports with NFL games. There's a Broadway musical in the mix as well. And one adaptation, as the panel was talking about, people are finding innovative ways to have events. And it's the Brett Kissel concert, the 5th one down, actually is going to be performed while people are parked in their cars. And so they're affecting social distancing that way. Let's just take one more look, and we'll skip the question. Being short on time, we'll just go right to the data that we're seeing in terms of the international travel. Now, U.S. domestics bookings are outpacing international. The gap is closing in the most distant horizon. When you look more than 6 months out, the proportion of domestic and international travel, Now, it's not saying that the exact proportion are evening up. It's the relative to their index at the pre-COVID rate are beginning to equalize. I think what's particularly interesting is as you look at the destinations in the 3 months to 6 months, 91 to 180 day period, it's a fairly traditional Mexico, UK, France, et cetera. People get a little bit more adventurous, 181 days out. You see Japan and Brazil showing up. Now, a few folks thought that the Japan bookings might be related to the Olympics. At this point, you can only book into air bookings into May 2021. So that doesn't reflect Olympics. There's some other demand for Japan separate from the Olympics. Let's turn to EMEA for the last couple of charts. And we're seeing a pickup in EMEA for both air and hotel. Here's the view of air. You'll see in the magnified call out that every booking window across the board, the pink is for trips departing in 2 weeks, turquoise for 31 to 60 days, amber for 91 days out, are all rising. These are all for international flights to Europe, originating in Europe. The destinations in the table on the right, you see a bit of overlap with Spain and Britain showing up both in the short-term horizons, 0 to 15 days, as well as the longer horizon, 91 days out. And now let's take a look at the hotel bookings. And there we see that the upturn is more modest. Again, this hotel booking volume is indexed to January 2nd for the 5 advanced booking windows. And every advanced period floated up a bit, though they're still under the index of 10. So 10% of where they were in the pre-COVID period. Now we see a tremendous overlap between the close-in bookings, 0 to 15 days, and the top destinations 3 months out. There's only one variation. In the first 4 are all the same, and in fact, in the same order, they're ranked by volume, and so it's pretty interesting they stayed so consistent for those time periods. There's only one variation at the bottom as Russia drops out and is replaced by the Netherlands. Then on the last slide, just to sum up here, a couple of things to keep in mind. You've seen a lot of data and trends in the last few minutes. In fact, you're likely being inundated with all sorts of information. Our goal is to help you make sense of it here at ADARA. That's our focus. And one principle that's helpful to keep in mind is what do you need to pay attention to and what is it you can put aside? Here's our framework. On the left are the immutable truths, the things that aren't changing. Travel is a basic human desire. The human spirit, travel is an integral part of our DNA. It's key to our human spirit and our desire to connect with friends and family and to explore. People will adapt faster than they themselves expect. Nobel Prize winning psychologists will tell you that humans are terrible at predicting how we'll likely feel about things in the future. We generally tend to think that things are worse and that they'll continue to be worse as we imagine how we're going to feel about it compared to what it'll actually feel when it's happening to us. And so I think the same thing applies to when we start to begin to travel and how we think about what it's going to be like for us individually to adapt. And finally, this idea that the recovery is going to be fragmented. The impact of the pandemic is fundamentally different than other economic downturns that did lead to more monolithic, more general returns. And so as you can see from the data I've shared today, it varies by region, it varies by the type of travel, it varies by the traveler. So if somebody comes and says, hey, here's a prediction of how the market's going to turn around, and it shows a fairly constant rate across all markets, go ahead and discount that because that's, or take it with a huge grain of salt because it's likely to be fragmented in bursts of demand. Leaves us with what's worth watching as you look for a rebound. It's the infection rates and unemployment rates, the impact willingness of resources to travel, availability of vaccine, the government policies, financial support packages, as well as restrictions, and lastly, supplier actions. We've seen how airlines changing refund policies have impacted booking patterns. Pricing changes and capacity all have an impact on demand, as well as suppliers' efforts to ensure safe and hygienic spaces. So that's where I encourage you to focus your attention as we track these early sounds of rebound. Thank you all for attending today. We appreciate the panel sharing their insights and all of you for continuing to tune in.